The year was 1899, and the air at Blackwood Manor Orphanage was, as usual, the color of slate and tasted of damp wool. The orphanage stood on the precipice of the Yorkshire moors, a stark, imposing structure of gray stone that seemed to actively repel the weak sunlight. For the 80-odd children residing within its walls, life was a metronome of chores, thin soup, and the echoing crack of matron Agnes Wick's hickory cane on the floorboards. Eliza Vance, 12 years old and possessor of eyes too old for her face, scraped the last of the hardened porridge from her bowl. She, like the others, was thin. Their uniforms, donations from parishes wealthier and thus more generous, hung on them like shrouds. This day, however, the metronome was broken. A man was coming, not a benefactor who might bring stale biscuits, nor an inspector who brought only fear and scrutiny. This man was bringing, as Matron Wick had announced with profound skepticism, an instrument of modern science. He arrived in a sputtering motor carriage, a thing of such noise and smoke that the crows took flight from the rooftop, cawing in protest. The man, a Mr. Alistair Abernathy, was a bundle of nervous energy, all waistcoat, spectacles, and a flurry of apologies for the mud his machine had tracked onto the matron's immaculately scrubbed flagstones. "The light, madam, the light," he chirped, peering up at the oppressive gray sky. "It is fleeting. We must assemble the children at once. The photograph is a commission from the Board of Governors, you understand, to show the healthy, robust nature of the Blackwood wards." Matron Wick, a woman built along the same architectural lines as the orphanage itself, merely sniffed. "Robustness is a matter of discipline, Mr. Abernathy, not silver plates. See that you are finished before Vespers. You will disrupt the laundry schedule." Mr. Abernathy bustled about, setting up his monstrous camera. It was a contraption of polished mahogany and brass lenses, perched atop 3 spindly legs. He kept vanishing beneath a black cloth, emerging moments later, his hair static and wild. "Eliza," Matron Wick commanded, her voice cutting through the damp air. "You and Thomas will stand in the front row. You are the least gaunt. Do not fidget, do not smile, and above all, do not blink. You will ruin the plate." Eliza nodded, her stomach tight. She hated the camera. It felt like an eye, a single, unblinking glass eye that saw too much. She found her place next to Thomas Peake, a boy whose resilience was legendary among the orphans, earned by surviving a winter in the infirmary 2 years prior. "Looks like a cannon," Thomas muttered under his breath, eyeing the lens. "Silence!" Matron Wick snapped, though she was 20 feet away. She seemed to possess a supernatural hearing for dissent. They were arranged on the sparse, dying lawn in front of the main building. 80 children, arranged by height, their faces scrubbed raw with lye soap. They stood before the imposing, soot-stained facade of Blackwood Manor. Eliza's gaze drifted upward. She wasn't supposed to. They were to stare directly at the brass eye, but her attention snagged on the north wing. The north wing was a dead space. It had been sealed off a decade ago, before Eliza's time, after what was only ever referred to as the bad winter. The diphtheria. The windows were caked in grime. The door at the end of the second-floor dormitory bolted from their side. It was a place of shadow, a repository for the orphanage's bad memories. She found herself looking at one window in particular, on the 3rd floor, right at the end of the sealed wing. It was the only one that seemed clean, or perhaps not clean, but disturbed, as if something had recently wiped a small circle clean from the inside. "Hold the posture," Mr. Abernathy's voice muffled from under the cloth. "Prepare for the ignition. Do not move." Eliza forced her eyes back to the lens. She stared, her eyes watering from the strain. She heard the click, the sizzle, and then, whoomp, a colossal, blinding flash of magnesium powder exploded, bathing the yard in an instantaneous, brilliant white light. It was brighter than the sun, a sterile chemical daylight that etched every detail into the world for a fraction of a second. The children gasped, many flinching. Eliza's vision swam with green and purple spots. In that brief, actinic glare, just before the flash consumed her vision, Eliza's eyes had involuntarily darted back to the north wing window. She had seen it, or perhaps the flash had imprinted it on her retina. A face, not a reflection, not a smudge. A pale, small face, pressed against the glass from the inside, its mouth a perfect, dark O of surprise or torment. "It is done," Mr. Abernathy announced, triumphant, emerging from his cloud. Eliza stood frozen, the smell of sulfur in her nostrils, the image of the pale boy burned behind her eyelids. She turned to Thomas, but he was rubbing his eyes, temporarily blinded like the rest. "Matron," Eliza whispered, tugging on the older woman's sleeve as they were dismissed. "Matron, in the window. The north wing." Matron Wick did not look. She grabbed Eliza's wrist, her fingers like iron bands. "You will speak of nothing, child," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You saw a trick of the powder. There is nothing in the north wing but dust and God's judgment. To speak otherwise is an offense. Do you understand me?" Eliza nodded, her throat dry with a new metallic taste of fear. But she knew what she had seen, and she knew it was not a trick of the light. Mr. Alistair Abernathy hummed a nervous tune as his motor carriage rattled back toward the small town of Bleakridge. He hated assignments like this. Orphanages, asylums, places heavy with misery. They always seemed to affect the chemistry. The very air felt sticky, resistant to the clean scientific process of photography. The children had been pale, unnervingly still. And that matron, a woman carved from granite and disapproval. He reached his modest studio above the town's bakery. The smell of yeast and warm bread usually comforted him, but today it just made him feel clammy. He carried the heavy glass plates, his cathedral plates as he called them, into his dark room. The red lamp cast the small space in a demonic glow. He preferred the predictability of the studio, the staged portraits of rosy-cheeked brides and proud merchants. This felt like archaeology, like excavating something that wished to remain buried. He prepared the developer, pyrogallic acid and sodium carbonate. He slid the first plate, the one of the matron alone, she had insisted, into the bath. The image resolved itself predictably. Her severe face, the keys at her waist, the harsh lines of her dress. He took a breath and slid the large plate, the group portrait, into the tray. He rocked it gently, back and forth, back and forth. The chemical smell was sharp, stinging his eyes. He watched the emulsion. First the highlights appeared, the white starched collars of the children, then the midtones, the gray stone of the manor, the sky. Finally, the shadows. The faces emerged, 80 pale ovals staring back at him. He checked his timepiece, counting the seconds. The contrast was good. The flash had done its work. A fine, sharp image. The Board of Governors would be pleased. He lifted the plate, dripping, and moved it to the stop bath, the acidic smell of vinegar cutting the air. He held it up to the red light to inspect it. His heart, which had been rattling along at its usual nervous pace, stopped. Utterly. "Good Lord," he whispered. His focus had been on the children, ensuring none had blurred. But his eye was drawn, just as Eliza's had been, to the architecture behind them, to the north wing, to the third-floor window. In the precise, unforgiving detail of the silver nitrate, it was there. It was not a smudge. It was not a chemical bloom or a fingerprint on the glass. It was a face. Abernathy's hands began to shake, sloshing the fixer. He fumbled the plate into the final bath and stumbled out of the darkroom, gasping for the warm, yeasty air of his studio. He leaned against the wall, his forehead slick with sweat. He was a man of science. He believed in optics, in chemistry, in light. He did not believe in impressions. He did not believe in the spiritualist nonsense that was so fashionable in London, the ectoplasm, the seances, the spirit photographs. He considered them vulgar frauds. He waited, his breathing shallow, until the requisite time had passed. He forced himself back into the red gloom, retrieved the plate, and brought it into the main studio, where daylight, such as it was, streamed through the skylight. He held the heavy glass negative up. The world was reversed. Black was white, white was black. The children's dark uniforms were pale. Their faces were dark, shadowy masks. But the thing in the window, it was still a face. Rendered in negative, it was even more grotesque. The eyes were two white, burning spots. The mouth, open in that O, was a black void. It was a child undeniably, but it was wrong. It was skeletal, the skin pulled tight over a pronounced skull, the hair thin and wispy, and it was looking right at him. No, not at him. At the camera. He placed the plate on his retouching desk and angled the large magnifying loupe over the spot. He zoomed in, as a future generation might say. The magnification revealed the horror in its entirety. The detail was sickening. He could see the texture of the grime on the outside of the window, and he could see, with perfect clarity, the pale, translucent flesh of two small hands pressed against the inside of the glass. The figure was not a reflection. It was in the sealed room. Abernathy fell back into his chair, a small, choked sound escaping him. He had a choice. He could discard the plate, smash it, claim the flash had failed, that the children had moved. He could return and take another. But the thought of returning to that place, of pointing his lens at that building again, filled him with a primal, icy dread. No, he would make the print. He would deliver it. It was, he told himself, a flaw, a double exposure perhaps, though he knew he had not reused the plate. A trick of the light and the glass, a simulacrum. He spent the rest of the day in a fugue, printing the image onto album and paper. Every time he exposed the negative, he felt as if he were committing a sin, bringing this thing further into the world. When he finally had the finished sepia-toned photograph mounted on heavy card, it was almost worse. The face was now a pale, ghostly presence, looking out from the shadows of the north wing. It was subtle. You wouldn't see it if you weren't looking. But if you did look, if you examined the window, you would see it. He wrapped the photograph in brown paper and string. He would deliver it to Matron Wick tomorrow. And then, he vowed, he would burn the negative. He would wash his hands of Blackwood Manor and its terrible, impossible secrets. The photograph arrived during the midday meal. The routine was sacred. Silence, the scraping of tin spoons on wooden bowls, the consumption of a thin, watery broth that smelled faintly of turnips. A junior matron, Miss Dawes, entered and whispered to Matron Wick, who sat on a raised dais, observing the children like a hawk. Matron Wick nodded, wiped her mouth with a linen napkin, and left the hall. Eliza's stomach, already hollow, clenched. She knew what was in that package. She exchanged a look with Thomas. His brow was furrowed. Since the flash, Eliza had been quiet, withdrawn. Thomas, ever the pragmatist, had tried to dismiss her fears. It was the powder, Eliza. He'd insisted in the dormitory the night before, his voice a low whisper in the dark, like seeing stars when you're struck on the head. A bright light plays tricks. It wasn't a trick, Tom. She'd whispered back, clutching her thin blanket. It was looking. It was sad. Now the proof was here. After the meal, the children were sent to their duties. Laundry for the older girls, boot blacking for the boys. Eliza, whose duty was dusting the matron's office, felt a thrill of pure terror. She entered the office, feather duster in hand. The room was cold, dominated by a large dark oak desk, and there, leaning against a bookshelf, was the package. Matron Wick was not present. She was overseeing the kitchen deliveries. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. Do not look. To speak of it is an offense. But her hands moved of their own accord. Her fingers fumbled with the string. She was just checking, just to prove to herself that she had been wrong, that it was a trick of the flash. She pulled the brown paper away. The photograph was stunning. The clarity was absolute. She saw herself, small and pale, her eyes wide. She saw Thomas, scowling slightly. She saw every child, frozen in time, a collection of ghosts in waiting. Her eyes moved, dreading the destination, up to the north wing, up to the third-floor window. She didn't need a magnifying glass. Mr. Abernathy's lens was too good. It was there, the face of the pale boy. It was clearer now than in her memory. The eyes were wide and black, the mouth open. But it wasn't a scream. It was a gasp. A permanent, silent gasp for air, for help. Eliza let out a small, strangled cry and dropped the photograph. It clattered against the desk. "What?" a voice boomed. "Is the meaning of this?" Eliza spun around. Matron Wick stood in the doorway, her face a thundercloud. I was dusting, Matron. Eliza stammered, her body going cold. It fell. Matron Wick's eyes swept from Eliza to the photograph on the floor. She moved with a frightening speed, snatching the card and placing it back on the desk face down. She advanced on Eliza. You were prying, Eliza Vance. Curiosity is a sin. It is the doorway through which all manner of wickedness enters the soul. She did not raise her hand. She did not need to. Her proximity was its own punishment. I saw it, Eliza whispered, unable to stop herself. In the window, the boy. Who is he? The question hung in the cold air. For a moment, the matron's composure cracked. Her sallow skin seemed to tighten, and a flicker of something, not anger, but pure, cold fear, passed through her eyes. It was gone as quickly as it came. You saw a reflection, Matron Wick said, her voice dangerously quiet. You saw a smudge of soot on the glass. You are an imaginative, ungrateful child, and you will invent phantoms to avoid your chores. She grabbed Eliza's arm. You will not speak of this again, to anyone. If I hear one whisper, one rumor of this smudge, you will spend a week in the isolation pantry. Am I understood? Yes, Matron. Now get out. Send Thomas Peake to me. His boot blacking is shoddy, and he will polish every hinge on this floor. Eliza fled. She found Thomas in the boot room, his hands black with polish. She wants you, Eliza said, her voice shaking. Thomas looked at her pale face. Eliza, you look like you've seen a... He stopped. You looked at it, didn't you? Eliza just nodded, tears welling. It's real, Tom. It's real. Thomas sighed, wiping his hands on his trousers. Then we're in for a dreadful time, aren't we? He headed toward the office, bracing himself for the matron's fury. But as he passed Eliza, he gave her a quick, determined look. But if it's real, he muttered, then it's a mystery, and I don't like mysteries I don't have the answer to. The rumor, however, had already begun. Miss Dawes, the junior matron, had also been in the office. She too had glanced at the photograph before the matron had arrived. She hadn't seen the detail, not really, but she had seen something. That evening in the refectory, she was overheard whispering to the cook. A trick of the light, I'm sure. But it looked for all the world like a child's face in the north wing window. Gave me a proper turn. The whisper was all it took. By nightfall, the entire orphanage was buzzing. The photograph, locked away in Matron Wick's desk, had become a relic, an object of supreme terror. The children, who had only seen the flash, now had a story to attach to it. They had a name for it. They called it the photograph. And they all wanted to see the face in the window. The photograph became a palpable presence in Blackwood Manor. It was an unseen weight, a secret held in the matron's locked drawer, and its power grew with its concealment. Matron Wick's behavior shifted. She became more volatile, her temper flaring at the slightest infraction. The hickory cane was used more frequently for infractions as minor as coughing during silent reading. She was a woman policing a secret, and the strain was making her crack. The children felt it. The house felt it. The air in the dormitories seemed colder, the drafts more insidious. She's protecting it, Thomas whispered to Eliza a few nights later, long after the lights-out bell. They were huddled in the small alcove by the dormitory stairs, the one spot they could whisper without the night proctor hearing. She's protecting herself, Eliza corrected. She was frightened, Tom. When I asked her who the boy was, she looked like I look when the big boys steal my bread. Hollow, Thomas agreed. So, what is it? A ghost? The word, spoken aloud, seemed to suck the warmth from their hiding place. In 1899, the world was alive with such stories. Spiritualism was rampant in the cities. People spoke to the dead in darkened parlors. But here, in the practical, harsh world of the orphanage, such things were fantasies. Until now. I don't know, Eliza said, shivering. But Mr. Abernathy saw it. He took the picture, and Matron saw it. And I saw it. We need to see it again. Properly. And how do we propose to do that? Thomas scoffed. Her office is locked tighter than the pantry. She leaves, Eliza said, her mind working. Every night at 9 o'clock. She goes to the boiler room to check the pressure gauge herself. She doesn't trust the groundskeeper, Mr. Hobb. And the key? It's on her chatelaine. She hangs it on the hook inside her office when she's at her desk. But when she walks the halls, she clips it to her belt. Eliza paused. But when she goes to the boiler room, she leaves the chatelaine in her office. The steam, it rusts the keys, she says. She uses a single brass key from her pocket for the boiler room door. Thomas stared at her, impressed. You've been watching. I watch everything, Eliza said simply. We have 10 minutes. From the moment she passes the landing until she returns. 10 minutes to pick the lock? No, Eliza said. The lock on her office is new. But the window, the one that faces the inner courtyard, the latch is broken. Mr. Hobb was meant to fix it, but he never did. It's how I get into dust when she misplaces the key. Thomas's eyes widened. That's expulsion, Eliza. If she catches you, she won't. The next night, the plan was set. The great hall clock chimed 9. From their vantage point, they watched Matron Wick's formidable silhouette pass down the main stairs, a single lantern in her hand, on her way to the depths of the manor. Now, Eliza whispered. They moved like shadows. Down the back stairs, through the cold scullery, and out into the small, oppressive courtyard. The air was frigid. Eliza, small and nimble, shimmied up the drainpipe, a trick she'd perfected to retrieve lost balls, and onto the narrow sill of the office window. As promised, the latch gave way with a small groan. She slipped inside, then hurried to the door to let Thomas in. The office was pitch black, smelling of ink, old paper, and the faint, unsettling scent of the matron's lavender water. Where is it? Thomas breathed, his voice loud in the silence. The desk, bottom drawer. She locked it. Then we've come for nothing. No, Eliza said. She went to the fireplace and retrieved the matron's heavy iron poker. Stand by the door. Tell me if you hear her. Eliza, you can't. She'll just think it was a thief from town, Eliza said, jamming the poker into the gap of the drawer. She put her weight on it. The old wood groaned. She'll know it was us. She'll suspect. She won't know. With a sharp crack, the lock splintered and the drawer flew open. Got it, Eliza whispered, triumphant. She pulled out the heavy card. The lamp. On her desk. Be quick. Thomas fumbled with a match. The wick caught, and a small trembling golden light filled the room. It was just enough. Eliza placed the photograph on the desk, and there, beside the inkwell, was the matron's magnifying glass, used for reading the fine print of her ledgers. Eliza picked it up. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Thomas steadied her wrist with his own. They bent over the photograph. Eliza moved the lens, bringing the print into sharp, terrifying focus. They zoomed in. The glass clarified every silver grain. It was not a boy. It was the memory of a boy. The skin was translucent, the eyes sunk deep into the skull. It wasn't just gasping. The lens revealed the unmistakable track of a tear, a dark line running from one of the wide black eyes. The hands. Dear God, the hands. They were skeleton thin, the knuckles like marbles, pressed, begging, against the glass. But it was the background that made Thomas let out a gasp. Through the translucent figure, magnified, they could just make out the interior of the room. It wasn't empty. There was the outline of a small iron bedstead, and on the wall behind it, a dark stain. He's still there, Eliza whispered, a tear tracing the same path down her own cheek. He never left that room. What did she do? Thomas said, his voice thick with a new kind of anger, replacing his fear. Creak. A floorboard groaned in the hallway outside, the sound of the boiler room door closing. She's coming back, Thomas hissed, his face draining of color. She's early. The lamp! Eliza shoved the photograph back into the broken drawer, slamming it shut. Thomas blew out the lamp, plunging them into darkness. The window, Eliza, go! There's no time. She'll see me in the courtyard, under the desk. Now! Eliza scrambled into the dark void beneath the matron's desk, pulling her knees to her chest. Thomas dove in beside her, crushing himself against the wall. They were hidden by the heavy oak paneling and the deep shadows. The door handle turned. The main office key rattled in the lock. The door swung open. Matron Wick entered, holding her lantern. The light swung across the room, illuminating the splintered wood of her desk drawer. Eliza held her breath. She could smell the matron's wool skirt, the damp chill she brought in from the boiler room. Matron Wick stood perfectly still for a count of 10. The silence was absolute, broken only by the ticking of the clock. She did not go to the desk. She did not raise the alarm. She simply stood in the center of the room, the lantern light illuminating her impassive face. "I know you are in here," she said, her voice conversational, almost pleasant. It was more terrifying than her rage. "The dust on the sill is disturbed. The air is warm." Eliza felt Thomas tremble beside her. "You think you are clever, children," the matron continued, walking slowly toward the desk. She placed the lantern down, right on top of it, illuminating the floor in front of them. "You think you have found a secret. You have found nothing. You have found only your own ruin." She bent down. Eliza and Thomas shrank back, but there was nowhere to go. Matron Wick peered into the darkness under the desk. Her face was upside down, the lantern light casting monstrous shadows across her features. She smiled. It was a dreadful, thin-lipped expression. "You wanted to see the picture," she whispered. "Now, you will see the room." Matron Wick did not drag them out. She simply said, "Come out." And they obeyed, limbs stiff, shame and terror warring for dominance. She looked at the broken drawer, then at the two of them. Thomas, trying to be brave, stepped slightly in front of Eliza. "It was me, matron," he said. "I broke the lock." Eliza just watched. "Nobility, Thomas Peake, does not suit you. It is as ill-fitting as your uniform," she said, her voice flat. She picked up the chatelaine from her desk hook, the keys jangling, a sound that usually meant punishment or chores. Tonight, it sounded like doom. "You are so curious about the North Wing," she said, walking to the door. "So eager to delve into matters that are not your concern. Very well, your curiosity will be satisfied." "Matron, no," Eliza said, a true cold dread seizing her. "The pantry, a week, like you said, please." "The pantry is a corrective for disobedience, Eliza. This is an education." She marched them out of the office and down the main hall. The orphanage was silent, all other children long asleep. Their footsteps echoed, a hollow march. They went up the main stairs, past their own dormitory landing, and up another flight, to the second body, to the heavy bolted door that sealed the north wing. The door was thick oak, painted a sickly green, the paint peeling. A heavy iron bolt, thick with rust, secured it. Above the bolt was a newer, heavy brass padlock. Matron Wick selected a key from her chatelaine. It grated in the lock. She slid the heavy bolt back. The sound was a shriek of tortured metal, loud enough, it seemed, to wake the dead. She pushed the door open. The air that rolled out was not air. It was a physical thing. It was cold, but not the clean cold of the moors. It was a dead, encapsulated cold, thick with the smell of dry rot, decayed lime, and something else. Something sickly sweet and sour. The ghost of old illness. Eliza gagged, covering her mouth. "In!" Matron Wick commanded. She nudged them forward into the blackness. They stumbled onto a floor covered in a carpet of dust so thick it muffled their footsteps. "Matron, the lamp," Thomas said, his voice trembling. "There are no lamps in this wing. There is no gas. It was disconnected." She did not follow them in. She stood in the doorway, a black silhouette against the relative light of the main hall. What are you doing?" Eliza asked, backing away from the palpable dark. "An hour," the matron said. "An hour in the dark to contemplate your sins, to contemplate the dangers of prying. Perhaps you will find the boy you are so fond of." "No, you can't. This is not right," Thomas yelled, surging back toward the door. Matron Wick was faster. She slammed the heavy oak door. They heard the shriek of the bolt sliding home. They heard the definitive, metallic click of the padlock. They were sealed in. They were in the north wing. "Eliza! Eliza, where are you?" Thomas's voice was a strained whisper. "Here." She found his arm in the suffocating blackness. They clung to each other. The blackness was total. There were no windows on this side of the hallway, only the sealed-off dormitory doors. "She's mad," Thomas breathed. "She's utterly raving mad. She'll be back in an hour. We just wait. We wait here by the door." "It's so cold, Tom." It was true. The temperature was a dozen degrees colder than the main hall. The chill seeped into their thin clothes instantly, making their bones ache. "It's just 'cause it's been sealed," Thomas reasoned, though his teeth were chattering. No heat, no fires for 10 years. They sat, their backs pressed against the rough wood of the door, their feet in the thick, soft dust. They sat in a silence so profound it buzzed in their ears. Minutes passed. 10, 15. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind rattling the distant windows, was magnified into a threat. What happened in here?" Eliza whispered, unable to bear the silence. "The bad winter," Thomas said. "That's what Mr. Hobb calls it. 1888 or 89. A fever. Diphtheria," Hobb said. "It took a lot of them." "How many?" "He doesn't say. He shakes. He says Matron Wick saved the house by her quick action. By isolating the sickness." "Isolating," Eliza repeated. The word felt heavy. They fell silent again. The cold was getting worse. It was an active, searching cold that found its way under their shirts, into their shoes. And then, a sound. Skr, skr, skr. It was not a creak. It was not the wind. It was the sound of something being dragged. A soft, rhythmic dragging coming from the far end of the hallway. "What was that?" Thomas hissed, grabbing Eliza's arm so tightly it hurt. "Shh." They listened. The dust, the dark, the cold. Skr, skr, skr. It was closer. It was the sound of a bare foot, perhaps, dragging through the thick dust. "Who's there?" Thomas called out, his voice cracking. "Is that you, matron? Is this a trick?" The dragging stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was heavy, expectant. "Tom," Eliza whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't feel my feet. It's so cold." Cough. It was a small sound, but it exploded in the narrow hallway. It was a dry, papery, agonizing cough. It came from right in front of them, just beyond their reach. Thomas yelped and scrambled backward, pulling Eliza with him. They crab-walked away from the door, deeper into the wing. "It's just the house settling," Thomas said, his voice high and frantic. Cough, cough, hack. It was the sound of someone choking, of lungs struggling against a membrane. "Stop it," Eliza cried, covering her ears. "Stop it, you're frightening us." The coughing subsided, replaced by a wet, ragged breathing, and it was moving. It was moving alongside them as they scrambled. "The stairs," Thomas gasped. "Where are the stairs to the 3rd floor, to the window?" "No, Tom, we have to stay by the door. She'll be back." "She's not coming back, Eliza. This isn't a punishment. It's a disposal. We have to find a window. We have to get out." He grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. They ran, blind, down the hallway, their hands out, brushing against the rough plaster walls. They ran from the sound of the breathing, which seemed to be everywhere now, a damp, cold presence that paced them in the dark. They slammed into a wall, the end of the hall. A dead end, Thomas panted, panic rising. No, the stairs. They must be here. His hands found a newel post. "Here, the stairs." They scrambled up, tripping on the dust-covered steps. The air grew colder, thinner. The smell of decay was stronger. They reached the 3rd floor landing. This was it, the hallway of the photograph. And here, there was light. A single, grime-caked window at the far end of the hall cast a weak, gray rectangle of moonlight onto the floor. It was just enough to see silhouettes, to see the hallway lined with doors to the small isolation rooms, and to see the figure standing in the middle of the hall. It was small, smaller than Eliza. It was just a shadow, a child-shaped patch of darkness, standing perfectly still, facing them. Thomas and Eliza froze, pressed against the stairwell. The figure did not move. "Hello?" Eliza whispered. Her voice sounded thin, alien. The figure tilted its head, a slow, unnatural movement. and from the shadow came the sound, the dry, wheezing breath. It's him," Thomas stammered. "It's the boy." We're sorry," Eliza said, tears streaming down her face, freezing on her cheeks. "We're sorry. We didn't mean to pry. We saw your picture." The shadow child took one dragging step toward them. Skrr, and another. Skrr. It was not walking. It was pulling itself along. "Back!" Thomas yelled. "Back down the stairs!" They turned to flee, but a sound from below stopped them. A door on the floor they had just left. A dormitory door, scraping open on rusted hinges. Cree, and then another. Scree, and another. From the blackness below, a new sound arose. A chorus, the sound of children crying. Not the sound of living, angry children, but a thin, dry, hopeless weeping. Dozens of them, the lost children of the bad winter. The figure in front of them raised a hand. It was pointing. Not at them, but at the room at the very end of the hall. The room from the photograph. "It wants us to go in there," Eliza whispered, her entire body numb with a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. "No," Thomas said, his voice resolute. "We go down. We run through them. They're just sounds. They're just shadows." "I am so cold," a voice whispered directly in Eliza's ear. She screamed. It wasn't the boy. It was a girl's voice. They were surrounded. The cold was no longer just in the air. It was in them, a paralytic, icy weight. The weeping from below grew louder, a tidal wave of sorrow. The small, shadowy figure continued to drag itself closer. "The room, Tom!" Eliza screamed, grabbing his hand. "It's the only place it's telling us to go. It's the only way." Making a terrible choice, they turned their backs on the weeping darkness below and ran, full tilt, down the third-floor hallway, straight toward the pointing figure, straight toward the window from the photograph. Running in the north wing was like moving through water. The air was thick, resistant. The dust rose in choking clouds around their ankles. The small, shadowy figure that had been blocking the hall did not move, but as they burst through it, a shock of intense, painful cold passed through Eliza's chest, taking her breath away. They reached the door at the end of the hall. Room 313. The handle was cold iron, simple and unlocked. Thomas threw the door open, and they fell inside, slamming it shut, fumbling for a lock that wasn't there. "The chair!" Thomas gasped, pointing at a small, dust-caked wooden chair. He wedged it under the handle, a flimsy barricade. They collapsed against the wall, panting, their breath pluming in the frigid air. They were in the room. It was exactly as the photograph had hinted. A small, narrow cell. An iron bedstead. Rusted. Its mattress a collapsed, molding ruin. A small wooden nightstand. A porcelain basin and pitcher, both cracked, and the window. It was large, dominating the small room, looking out over the front lawn. The same lawn where they had stood for the photograph. The glass was thick with the grime of a decade, except for one spot. A perfect circle at the height of a small child had been wiped clean from the inside. This was the source of the light. The moonlight pooled on the floorboards, illuminating the small, terrible space. The sounds from the hallway were muffled now. The weeping had subsided, but the scraping had returned. Skirp, skirp, right outside their door. "It's here," Eliza whispered, pointing at the door. The chair wedged beneath the handle began to jitter, to rattle against the wood as something pushed, weakly but persistently, from the other side. "We are trapped," Thomas said, his voice hollow. He looked at the window. "Third floor. It's too high to jump. We're trapped." "No," Eliza said, her mind racing, fighting the paralyzing cold. "The photograph. The boy. He didn't point at the room to trap us. He pointed to it. He wanted us to see." "See what, Eliza? Dust? A broken bed? It's just an empty room." "It's not empty." Eliza stood, her legs shaking, and walked to the center of the room. She looked at the bed. She looked at the nightstand. "The logbook," she breathed. "In the matron's office. When we found the picture, there was a logbook on her desk." "She was checking the ledgers," Thomas said, not understanding. "No, it wasn't a ledger. It was older, bound in red leather. It said Blackwood Manor, Infirmary Log, 1888. Scrape. Bump. The thing at the door pushed harder. The chair groaned. She knew, Eliza said, piecing it together. She knew we were getting close. When I asked her about the boy, she looked at the book. She was remembering. What is in here, Eliza? What does he want? Eliza scanned the moonlit room. There was nothing, just dust and decay. But the stain, the one she'd glimpsed in the magnified photograph, it was on the wall near the floor by the nightstand. A dark, irregular pattern. She knelt beside it, ignoring the scraping at the door. She reached out a trembling finger and touched the floor. The dust was thinner here. She blew on it. Carved into the floorboards, with what must have been a nail or a piece of sharp stone, were letters. Crude, childish, desperate. Julian, Julian. Eliza whispered, tracing the name. His name is Julian. Crack. The chair leg splintered. The door was pushed open a few inches, a vertical slice of profound blackness. A small pale hand, its fingers like bird claws, slipped through the gap. Thomas yelled and threw himself against the door, holding it shut with all his weight. Eliza, find something, anything. Eliza looked around frantically. The nightstand. She grabbed it, pulling it away from the wall. It was light. The wood dried out. As it moved, something fell from behind it. Something tucked between the stand and the wall. It was a book, a small, cheap drawing tablet. Its cover warped by damp. She snatched it up. The hand at the door retracted. The pushing stopped, as if it had wanted her to find it. Thomas, panting, slumped against the door, which remained partially open. Eliza opened the tablet. She angled it toward the moonlight. The first few pages were simple, childlike drawings. A bird on a branch. The orphanage with a smiling sun above it. A crude drawing of Matron Wick, looking almost kind. Then the drawings changed. The next page was a drawing of this room. The bed. The window. The next page, the same drawing, but the door was darker, with a heavy line drawn across it. A bolt. The next, a drawing of a bowl of soup with a large X drawn through it. Eliza turned the page. It was not a drawing. It was writing. The same crude, desperate hand as the carving on the floor. Mama. She locked the door. She says I am sick. The sickness is in the house. I am the last one. Eliza's blood turned to ice. She read on, her voice a shaking whisper. The other children are gone. Matron says they went to the county hospital. She says they are better, but I hear them. At night, they are crying in the hall. My throat is tight. It is hard to breathe. Matron brings water but no food. She says the fever must starve. Eleka turned the page. The writing was weaker, sloping. She stopped coming. The water is gone. I called and called. No one came. I am so cold. I saw them from the window. The children playing on the lawn. They are not at the hospital. They are better. Why am I not better? I am so hungry. I am so cold. The last page had only 3 words scrawled in the center. Mama. The window. Eliza dropped the book. The truth, in all its brutal, horrifying simplicity, settled on them. She didn't isolate him, Thomas whispered, his face a mask of sick comprehension. She left him. Diphtheria, Eliza said, the word tasting like ash. It forms a membrane in the throat. You can't breathe. You starve. She locked him in here to die, alone, while the other children played on the lawn. Skr. Skr. The sound was in the room with them. They both spun around. The figure was standing by the window. Julian. He was no longer a shadow. In the moonlight, they could see him, or the essence of him. He was small, frail, wearing a thin hospital gown. His skin was the color of whey, his hair matted. He was not looking at them. He was looking out the window, at the lawn below. His pale, thin hands were pressed against the glass. He turned, his movements slow, his head tilting. His face was gaunt, skeletal. His eyes were 2 vast, dark pools of sorrow. His mouth opened, that black O from the photograph. He did not make a sound, but a voice filled their heads, a cold, dry whisper that felt like dust and spider silk. Cold. Locked. Why? Thomas and Eliza were frozen, pinned against the wall by a grief so profound, so ancient, it had become a physical force. The door behind them, the one Thomas had been guarding, flew open with a sudden, violent bang, smashing against the wall. Matron Agnes Wick stood in the doorway, her face contorted in a mask of inhuman rage, a heavy iron furnace poker in her hand. "You will not," she hissed, her voice guttury, "defile this place. You will not speak his name." While Eliza and Thomas were enduring their ordeal, another, quieter drama was unfolding 2 floors below. Mr. Hobb, the aged groundskeeper, was making his final rounds. His knees ached, a barometer for the coming frost. His duties were simple: ensure the scullery door was bolted and check the coal stores. But his routine had been broken. He had heard the sound, the unmistakable, unforgettable shriek of the north wing bolt being drawn. He'd been at Blackwood for 30 years. He'd been there when Matron Wick arrived, a sharp, ambitious woman in her 20s. He'd been there for the bad winter of 1888. He'd been the one to cart the small, sheet-wrapped bundles to the churchyard under the matron's strict orders, always at night, to prevent panic. He'd been the one to seal that wing. He'd bolted the door. He'd nailed the boards over the service entrance. He had, at her command, contained the sickness, and he had lived with the silence of it ever since. Now, hearing that bolt drawn, he knew. The matron had finally, after all these years, crossed a line from which there was no return. He'd seen her, earlier, marching the 2 children, the inquisitive girl and the stubborn boy, up the stairs. Hobb was a simple man, cowed by the matron's iron will. But he was not an evil one. He shuffled to the base of the main staircase, his lantern casting a weak, trembling light. He looked up into the darkness. "Matron?" he called, his voice a reedy quaver. "Matron, them children, it ain't right. That place, it ain't meant to be opened." There was no answer but the draft whistling under the front door. A new sound reached him, a faint bang and a muffled shout, filtering down from the sealed, distant wing. His face, etched with a lifetime of hard labor, crumpled. "Lord, forgive me," he whispered. "Lord, forgive us all." He knew he was too old, too weak to confront her. She was a fortress, but there was one other who knew. The man with the camera. The man who had, Hobb suspected, seen the same thing he himself saw every night in his dreams. Mr. Abernathy. Hobb was not a fast man. It took him nearly half an hour to harness the old pony to the orphanage trap. He didn't take a coat. He just went, his mind fixed on a single terrifying thought. She had put living children in there with the dead. He drove the pony hard on the dark, rutted road to Bleakridge, the trap rattling, the pony's breath pluming. He arrived at the bakery well past 10 o'clock, a scandalous hour. He pounded on the side door to Mr. Abernathy's studio. Alistair Abernathy, meanwhile, had been trying to drink himself into a state of scientific denial. He had his darkroom, a bottle of brandy, and the cursed glass plate. He'd been staring at it for hours, trying to find the flaw, the chemical reason, the logical explanation. There was none. He was a man haunted. He had printed the photograph, yes, but he had not been able to bring himself to burn the negative. To do so felt wrong. It felt like destroying the only witness. When the pounding came, he nearly smashed the bottle. He stumbled to the door, his nerves shot. "We're closed! Go away!" "Mr. Abernathy, sir," a voice cried. "It's Hobb, from the manor. You gotta come. She's done it, sir. She's put 'em in." Abernathy ripped the door open. The old groundskeeper stood there, shaking, his face pale in the moonlight. "What are you talking about, man? Put who in where?" "The children," Hobb cried, grabbing the photographer's arm. "The 2 you liked, the girl, Eliza, and the boy, Matron Wick." She locked him in the north wing, with him. Abernathy's blood ran cold. The brandy fog vanished, replaced by a crystalline, sober terror. Him? Him who, Hobb? Hobb finally broke. The confession of a decade spilled out of him in a torrent of whispered, frantic words. The boy. Julian. The last one of the bad winter. She said she was isolating him. She said the sickness had to be contained, or the board would close us. She said the others were at the county hospital, but they wasn't. They was in the churchyard, all of them. 22 children, sir, in a fortnight. Abernathy leaned against the door frame, his stomach heaving. 22. But Julian, he was the last. He held on. He was in that room, 313. She took him his water, and then she just stopped. She told me he'd been taken like the others. She ordered me to bolt the door. She said the wing was foul. She said it was God's will. Hob was sobbing now, clutching Abernathy's shirt. But I heard him, sir. Days later, I was on the lawn. I heard him tapping on the glass. A little tap, tap, tap. But I was a coward. I did nothing. I let her do it. And now she's put those two living children in that room. She means to make them part of it. The full monstrous weight of the photograph, of the face in the window, crashed down on Alistair Abernathy. It wasn't a ghost he had captured. It was an echo of a child tapping on a window, desperate to be seen, desperate to be saved, until he had no strength left to tap. My camera, Abernathy whispered, his voice shaking with a new terrible resolve. Hob, get the trap. We are going back, and I am bringing my flash powder. What good will that do, sir? She denies him, Abernathy said, his eyes wild as he grabbed his equipment. She denies what she did. She calls him a smudge, a trick of the light. I'm a man of science. I will bring the light. I will bring so much light that not even God will be able to look away. Matron Wick advanced into room 313, the furnace poker held low, like a weapon. The faint moonlight from the window glinted off the dark iron. She was no longer the severe, disciplined matron. This was something else. A zealot. A woman guarding the tomb of her greatest sin. You should not have come here, she hissed, her eyes fixed on Eliza, who still clutched the drawing book. This is a place of sickness. It must be kept clean. You killed him, Thomas stammered, scrambling to his feet, putting himself between the matron and Eliza. You left him here to die. I did what was necessary, she shrieked, her voice cracking. The sickness. It was in the walls, in the air. The board would have closed us. They would have turned us all out. I saved this house. I saved 80 children by sacrificing one. He was a boy, Eliza cried, tears of ice and anger on her face. He was just a boy. And he was cold. And he was hungry. And he trusted you. He was infected. Matron Wick spat. He was a vessel of contagion. I did my duty. And you, with your prying, your whispers, your photograph, you have disturbed the peace. You have let the sickness out. As if summoned by her words, the entity by the window, Julian, turned his head. He looked at the matron. The temperature in the room, already impossibly low, plummeted. The air grew brittle. A fine layer of frost, sparkling in the moonlight, began to crawl across the walls, radiating from the small, spectral figure. Matron Wick faltered. She had seen him before, a flicker in the corner of her eye, a cold spot in her office, but she had denied it, pushed it down. Now, he was here. Solid, real, an accusation in spectral flesh. No, she whispered, her rage collapsing into a new, deeper terror. No, be gone. You are dust. You are a memory. I cleansed this room. Julian took one, slow, dragging step toward her. Skrr. His mouth opened. The silent, whispered voice filled their minds, but this time it was not just cold. It was a single piercing word. Matron. Matron Wick screamed, a raw animal sound. She raised the poker. Get back! Get back, you unholy thing! She swung the poker, not at the children, but at the apparition. The iron bar passed directly through Julian's chest, meeting no resistance, and smashed into the wall, sending plaster and frost showering onto the floor. The apparition did not flinch. It was now inches from her. It raised its own pale, translucent hand. At that exact moment, the frantic pounding of Mr. Hobb and Mr. Abernathy reached the front door of the orphanage, far below. Open up! In the name of God, open this door! Abernathy roared, hammering with his fists. In the room, Matron Wick stumbled back, her eyes wide with madness, pressed against the wall. Julian continued his slow, relentless advance. "Eliza, the door, now!" Thomas yelled. They bolted. They ran from the room, from the confrontation between the murderer and her victim. They scrambled into the hallway, which was still and silent, the weeping of the other children having faded. They clattered down the stairs, down into the blackness of the second floor, guided only by the memory of the layout. They found the great bolted door and pounded on it. "Let us out, please. Let us out. She's here. He's here." On the other side, Abernathy and Hobb heard them. "They're alive!" Hobb cried, weeping with relief. "The bolt!" Abernathy yelled. "Matron has the key." No, the bolt," Hobb said, his mind clearing. She can't lock it from in there." "The padlock is on this side. She must not have locked it. She meant for them to... Abernathy didn't wait. He threw his shoulder against the heavy oak door. It didn't budge. "The bolt, Hobb. She must have locked it again. The key. She's in there with them," Hobb wailed. "No," Eliza cried from the other side, her voice muffled. "She's not. She's upstairs, in the room. We're locked in, but she's not at the door." Abernathy was confused. "Hobb, she must have the key." "She does," Eliza screamed. "She has the key, but she's not here. She's with him." A terrible dawning realization hit Abernathy. The matron hadn't locked them in and left. She had locked them in and then followed them. He realized his error. The matron was not in the room with the children. The children were here, at the door. The matron was... "Where is she?" Abernathy roared through the door. "Upstairs, room 313, Thomas yelled. She's fighting him." "Hobb, the keys. Does she have a spare set?" "In her office," Hobb said. "The desk. The one we... Oh, Lord. The one we broke." Abernathy didn't hesitate. "Stay there," he yelled at the children. "We are coming." He turned to Hobb. "You stay here. Talk to them. Keep them calm. I am going to the office." Alistair Abernathy, a man who minutes ago was a nervous, brandy-soaked photographer, ran. He ran to the inner courtyard, used the same drainpipe Eliza had, and scrambled through the open window, smashing the glass with his boot to widen the entry. He landed in the dark office, found the splintered desk, and thrust his hand into the drawer. He felt the heavy ring of the chatelaine. He found the heavy brass padlock key. He sprinted through the dark, silent halls, his heavy boots banging on the floorboards, a man possessed. He reached the north wing door, Hobb cowering beside it. "Stand back!" Abernathy thrust the key into the padlock. It turned. He grabbed the heavy, rusted bolt and, with a groan of effort, pulled it back. The door flew open. Eliza and Thomas tumbled out, collapsing into the light of the main hall, gasping, their faces streaked with tears and dust, their hair white with frost. They were shaking so violently they could barely stand. "You're safe," Abernathy said, pulling them close. "You're safe." "She's still in there," Eliza whispered, her eyes wide, staring back into the black, cold gullet of the hallway. He has her." Abernathy looked at Hobb. Hobb shook his head, his eyes pleading. "Don't go in, sir. It's not our place." But Abernathy had his camera. He had his magnesium powder. "You," he said to Hobb, "take these children to the kitchen, light the stove, get them warm, now." "Sir, no," Hobb pleaded. "I am not an exorcist," Abernathy said, his voice grim. "But I am a witness, and I will have evidence." He left the children with the groundskeeper and, hoisting his tripod, stepped alone into the freezing darkness of the north wing. Alistair Abernathy walked the same path the children had, but he was not blind. He had a small oil lamp from the hall, and it cast a weak, greasy light. The dust on the floor was disturbed, marked by the children's frantic tracks, and by another set, a single, dragging line. He felt the cold, a penetrating, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the weather. He heard the whispers, the residual sorrow of the place, the faint sound of weeping that seemed to come from the walls themselves. But he pushed on, a scientist entering the ultimate unknown. He climbed the stairs to the third floor. The landing was arctic. His breath fogged, and the flame in his lamp guttered, the oil thickening from the cold. He walked down the hall. All the doors were open, just a crack, revealing rooms of absolute darkness. He reached the end. Room 313. The door was wide open, as the children had left it. But the room was not dark. It was filled with a faint, pulsing, sickly blue light. It was the color of a gas flame, the color of moonlight on ice. Abernathy planted his tripod in the hallway. He set his camera, his hands stiff and clumsy with cold. He slid a fresh, dry glass plate into the holder. He prepared his flash powder tray, a generous, explosive amount. He looked into the room. Matron Agnes Wick was backed into the corner by the nightstand. She was on her knees, her gray hair undone, streaming over her face. She was not screaming. She was weeping. Deep, shuddering, hopeless sobs. The iron poker was on the floor at her feet. In the center of the room, by the bed, stood the boy, Julian. He was clearer now, fully manifest, drawing on the energy of the matron's terror, on the cold of the building. He was a creature of ice and memory. He was glowing with that faint blue luminescence. He was just standing there, watching her. His face held no anger, no malice, only a vast, bottomless, and eternal question. Why? I had to. Matron Wick babbled, her words slurring. It was for the good of the house. It was for the others. A sacrifice. God understands sacrifice. Julian took a step toward her. The frost on the floor cracked under his spectral foot. He raised his hand not to strike, but to point. He pointed at the matron, then at his own throat, then at the empty water pitcher. "I brought you water," she cried, clutching her head. "I did, until the fever. The book said to starve the fever. I was afraid. I was afraid to come back in. I was afraid you would give it to me." Julian pointed again. At the window, at the lawn below. "I couldn't let you mix," she whispered. "I couldn't. I had to choose. I chose the living. You." The voice was no longer a whisper in the mind. It was a physical sound, a dry, cold rushing of air, a word spoken with a throat sealed by disease and death. "Chose. You." Matron Wick looked up, her face a mask of utter, soul-shattering despair. She saw her sin not as a necessary act, but as a cowardly, selfish murder. She saw the decades of her life built on the tiny, starved foundation of this one small boy. She raised her hands pleadingly. "Forgive me, Julian. Child, forgive me." Julian simply stood, his hand outstretched, his mouth open. That silent, permanent gasp. He was the question that could never be answered, the sin that could never be absolved. He was not a monster. He was a victim, and his presence was the only justice this world could offer. Abernathy knew this was it. This was the moment. The confrontation. The truth. He held the detonator for his flash. "Matron Wick!" he yelled. She looked up, startled, her eyes finding him in the hallway. Julian turned, his glowing blue form pivoting toward the new sound. He looked directly at the camera. He looked directly at Abernathy. The photographer saw the face, not the ghostly smudge from the first plate, but the child. The starved, terrified, lonely child. "Now," Abernathy whispered, and pressed the trigger. Whoomp! The explosion of magnesium powder was deafening in the narrow hall. The light was not light. It was a physical blow. It was a sun exploding in the north wing, a blast of pure chemical white that vaporized the shadows, the blue glow, the frost, the matron's despair, and the boy's sorrow. It was an act of absolution, a moment of pure, blinding scientific truth. The light died, plunging the hallway into an even more profound darkness, the lamp on the floor having been extinguished by the blast. The smell of sulfur and burnt magnesium filled the air. Abernathy stood, blinded, his heart hammering, spots dancing in his vision. Silence. The cold was gone, the oppressive weight, the smell of sickness, the sound of weeping, all of it, gone. The air was just old, dusty, empty. A whimpering sound came from the room. Abernathy, his hands shaking, relit his lamp. He held it high and stepped into room 313. Matron Agnes Wick was huddled in the corner, her face buried in her hands. She was just a woman, an old, cold, broken woman. The room was empty. The bed was empty. The window was empty. Julian was gone. Abernathy looked at the matron. He felt no pity. He felt only the cold, hard clarity of the glass plate he held. "It is done," he said. He left her there weeping in the dark and walked back into the living part of the house. Abernathy did not develop the plate at the orphanage. He took the children, wrapped in blankets by a shell-shocked Mr. Hobb, and loaded all three of them into the pony trap. He drove them back to Bleakridge to his studio, leaving Hobb to deal with the matron. Eliza and Thomas did not speak the entire way. They just huddled together, radiating a chill that had little to do with the night air. He brought them into his studio, sat them by his small stove, and brewed them a pot of strong, sweet tea, laced with a splash of the brandy he had failed to finish. "Drink," he ordered. "It will stop the shaking." They drank. The color slowly returned to their faces. What was that, Mr. Abernathy?" Eliza finally asked, her voice small. "The light." "That," Abernathy said, preparing his darkroom, "was the truth. Now I am going to see if I captured it." He went into the red-lit room, his heart pounding a different rhythm now. Not of fear, but of anticipation. He slid the plate into the developer. He rocked the tray. The image resolved. The highlights first, the bright white-hot center of the magnesium flash, reflected in the window, then the mid-tones, the wall, the bedstead, the texture of the matron's dress. He held his breath. And then, the shadows. It was empty. He saw the matron, huddled in the corner, her face a white blur of terror. He saw the room, the furniture, the poker on the floor. But the boy, Julian, was not there. The plate was empty. The ghost had not been captured. Abernathy let out a long, shuddering breath. He felt a profound, crushing disappointment. He had failed. He had no proof. It was his word, and the word of two terrified orphans, against a matron who would deny everything. He moved the plate to the fixer, his movements mechanical, defeated. He stared at the glass, at the empty space where the glowing boy should have been. But wait, his eye was caught by something else. The wall behind where Julian had been standing. The blast of light, the actinic, revealing glare, had illuminated the wall in perfect sharp detail. The plaster that had been shattered by the matron's poker. It wasn't just plaster. Abernathy snatched his magnifying loupe. The flash had been so bright, it had penetrated the very surface of the wall, and it had revealed what was underneath. The room, he realized, had been smaller once. The wall Julian had been standing in front of was newer, a false partition. The flash, in its violent intensity, had highlighted the faint, vertical line of a hidden doorway, one that had been plastered over, papered over, and painted over, decades ago. And the plaster, where the matron's poker had struck, he saw it, the edge of a small wooden panel. He left the dark room, his mind reeling. "Mr. Abernathy?" Eliza asked, seeing his pale, strange expression. "Children," he said, his voice low. "The matron. She didn't just lock the door, she sealed the room." "What do you mean?" Thomas asked. "The room. It connects. There's a hidden door, a panel. I think I know why he never left. He wasn't just in the room. He was in the walls." He looked at the two of them. They were the only other witnesses. "The first photograph," he said suddenly. "The one in the matron's desk. Is it still there?" I think so," Eliza said. "We just put it back." "Thomas," Abernathy said, "you are fast. I need you to go back. With Hobb. I need you to get that photograph. Not the negative, the print. The print that I made. Do you understand?" "Go back?" Thomas said, aghast. "She won't harm you now, boy," Abernathy said, his voice hard. "She is broken. Hobb will be there. Go. Now. Eliza will stay here, where it is warm." Thomas, seeing the fire in the photographer's eyes, nodded. He took a deep breath, downed the last of his tea, and slipped out the door, back into the night, to retrieve the one piece of evidence that started it all. Thomas found Blackwood Manor in chaos. The sun was just beginning to cast a weak gray light over the moors. Mr. Hobb was in the main hall, speaking in low, frightened tones to Miss Dawes, the junior matron. who looked as if she hadn't slept. She had, it turned out, heard the children's screams and the matron's and had been hiding in her own room, too terrified to move. The matron herself was gone. "Gone where?" Thomas demanded. "Just gone, lad," Hobbs said, wringing his hands. "When I went up to check, the room was empty. Her office is empty. She's fled." "The photograph," Thomas said, pushing past him. He ran to the office. The door was ajar. The window was shattered. The drawer was still broken. Thomas plunged his hand in. His fingers met paper, ledgers, ink nibs. But the heavy card of the photograph was gone. "No," he whispered. "No, she couldn't have." He tore the office apart, pulling books from shelves, upending the chair. It wasn't there. She had taken it. The one piece of proof. He returned to the main hall, defeated. "She took it. It's gone." Hob and Miss Dawes looked at each other, their faces pale. Without the matron, the orphanage, its 80 children, was leaderless. Without the proof, her crimes were just a story. "Wait," Miss Dawes said, her hand going to her mouth. The copies." "What copies?" Thomas asked. "Mr. Abernathy. He delivered the main print to the matron. But he was commissioned by the board. He was to make 3 prints in total. One for the matron, one for the Board of Governors in London, and one for the county archive. He sent the other 2 by post yesterday afternoon, before all this." Thomas's mind spun. "The post, it's already gone. But the archive," Miss Dawes said, "is just in Bleakridge, at the town hall. He probably delivered it by hand." Thomas didn't wait. He ran from the orphanage, all the way back to Bleakridge, his lungs burning. He burst into Abernathy's studio just as Eliza was dozing by the stove. "She's gone," he panted. "And she took the picture, but Miss Dawes said—" "The archive copy." Abernathy, who had been staring at his failed negative, looked up, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. "The archive copy," he repeated. "Of course, the scientific method. One must always have a control." He grabbed his hat and coat. "Eliza, you stay here. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Thomas, you are with me. We are going to the town hall." The Bleakridge town hall was not yet open for business. Abernathy, however, was a man of some local standing, and his pounding on the door eventually roused the clerk, a fussy man named Mr. Dalloway. "Abernathy, what is the meaning of this? It's not yet 7 o'clock. "It is a matter of life and death, Dalloway," Abernathy said, pushing past him into the cold, ink-smelling hall. "The county archive. The new acquisitions. I must retrieve the photograph I delivered yesterday." "Retrieve? Impossible," Dalloway sputtered. "It has been catalogued. It is property of the county. You cannot simply—" "Dalloway," Abernathy said, grabbing the man by his lapels, an act of aggression so uncharacteristic it shocked the clerk into silence. "At Blackwood Manor, a crime of an unimaginable nature has occurred. That photograph is the only evidence. You will give it to me, or I will have the constable here to arrest you for obstruction." The clerk, seeing the madness in Abernathy's eyes and the grim, frost-bitten appearance of Thomas Peake, fumbled for his keys. He led them down to the basement to the archive. It was a dry, cold room, filled with ledgers and boxes. "File 1899P, Public Works and Institutions," Dalloway muttered, running his finger down a shelf. "Here, Blackwood Manor, wards of, sealed yesterday." He handed a large, string-tied folio to Abernathy. Abernathy's hands shook as he untied the string. He pulled out the photograph. It was identical to the one the matron had stolen, a perfect, sepia-toned print. "Here," Abernathy said, handing it to Thomas. "You were there. You look." Thomas took the photograph. He looked at the faces of his friends. He looked at his own. Then, his hand trembling, he raised his eyes to the north wing, to the third-floor window. He let out a strangled sob. It's still there," he whispered, his voice breaking. "He's still there." Abernathy took the print. He angled it to the weak gaslight of the basement. There it was, the pale, spectral face, the O of the mouth, the hands pressed to the glass. The second exposure, the one in the room, had been an act of release. It had set Julian's spirit free. the one that had haunted the halls, the one that had confronted the matron. But this, the first photograph, it was not a ghost. It was an imprint. Spirit photography, Abernathy whispered, his scientific mind finally grasping the awful truth. The spiritualists are right in a way, but it's not ectoplasm. It's trauma, the magnesium flash, the silver nitrate. It didn't just capture the light, it captured the memory. The sheer agonizing psychic force of a child, starving, alone, pressing his hands to the glass, praying to be seen by the children on the lawn. The photograph wasn't a picture of a ghost. It was the ghost. It was the final, desperate act of Julian, permanently etched into the world by chemistry. What do we do with it? Thomas asked, looking at the horrifying, tragic image. Abernathy looked at the print. He looked at his failed second negative. He looked at Thomas. We show them, he said. We show them all.